you're afraid to look at your numbers, they are already controlling your business. Welcome to Deals with Heels, where female entrepreneurs thrive. I'm Debra, your host. Today, we are talking about something every woman in business needs: profit clarity without overwhelm. So let's just get right into it. My guest is Marie Torossian. I don't know if I said that right. I forgot to ask.
Yes.
She is the founder of the Profit Lab. She's ex-certified executive performance business coach, an expert in accounting, valuation, and business strategy. She's the creator of Valuation MT methodology and has an award-winning firm and is a trusted industry voice in the world of finance and profitability. Today, we're going to stop guessing about money, so get ready to find out how. Welcome, Marie, to Deals with Heels.
Thank you, Debra. What a great
Yay.
intro. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
I am excited to have you on the show. I talk a lot about scarcity mindset and how it affects our finances and how we think about money in ways that we aren't realizing that we're thinking about money. But I'm not an expert, and I'm excited to talk to you all about it. So let's just start, Marie. What drew you into accounting and finance, and when did you realize that entrepreneurs were missing a critical piece?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what got me into accounting is going back to working with my dad. My dad opened up a store back in my country in Lebanon. I was probably about 11 years old, and every day after school I would go to the store and I would be, hanging out, doing stuff, inventory, all of the basic things that you would need in a, regular store. And over time he had switched from different types of industry. I think back in the 90s we had um a store that we used to sell, wool. People would do their own little sweaters, and maybe I'm not even using the correct word, but they would do their own sweaters. But then in Lebanon, we were starting to receive a lot of, shipments from Europe and US. So people didn't do that anymore. So my dad switched to like children's clothing. And then after a while, that shift into a mini market and a deli. We were making sandwiches, all of these things. So I saw him shift very fast.
What a pivoter. I mean, what a great example of, I got to pivot. This isn't working. I got to change something.
Right. So throughout his journey, I've been always there, helping out, and, whether serving a customer, helping with what we say now, maybe accounts payable. But at the time, I didn't know. I just knew that there was a bill, it had to be paid. There was no real accounting being done. And then I went to college my first year. I chose to be, in general business, and they put me in that first accounting class. My eyes were wide open. I was like, I didn't know there was anything like this. Here I am, I'm doing numbers for years with my dad, trying to figure it out, getting things organized in folders, all, I would say, cash basis, right? Because we're just writing things down and there's really no accounting system that we're using. We're just a cash register and cash. That's it. So when I saw that, I was like, this is what I've been missing. This is information that I didn't know it was even available. I mean, think about that. So from that day on, I decided accounting would be a very good, thing to study, like in college. But I left the country, the second semester, I was already out of that country. I went to Canada. I lived in Montreal for a while. So I really didn't get back to college until I came to the US and to Miami. I think 2005 or 2006 is when I started with, and
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I picked, as soon as I applied, accounting. So
It
I
really
missed
stuck with you.
years, but I stuck to it. I definitely have to study accounting because I figured any business that I do one day, or any business at all, they will always need accountants. So, either way, I need to know what goes into accounting.
Well, and I liked it that because a lot of people would have steered completely away from what their dad got them into. And it appealed to you. It was like your spot and you found it really young. And I really admire that. That's difficult to do. I was really lost. I also loved my college accounting class. I was a real math nerd growing up and I loved that accounting class. I did. I remember the first and a second counting. I really liked both of them. And it wasn't long. I mean, I started doing my mom's taxes at a really young age, but I loved numbers, but it wasn't really my happy spot, I guess, is what I would say there. So when did you notice the second part of that question, when did you notice that entrepreneurs are really leaving out some critical stuff?
I would say same from the even watching my dad. I mean, I know he was missing out on information. So even though it's a smaller country and it's a third world country, I still know that my dad, if he had better information or if he actually had financials to look at and that someone would help him understand how the business is operating, I think he would have made very different decisions. So part of that notice is very early on. And when I look back, I'm like, what I know now, if we were back in the day, I could have made him completely do different things because I could help him with the financial numbers. Like, you really
Right.
understand what he was doing, what his sales were. He was just going day by day.
Well, I mean, back then, I guess there were businesses and people that were doing it differently, but also they were like all of us. There's a lot of people now that they're just getting it. They're just doing it. They're making it happen and finding a way to yes. Why do so many capable, intelligent women avoid financials? What do you see when you're out there specifically for women?
What I notice is, and this is in general, and not just maybe women, but more women, we just accept what is there. And I can tell from myself too, even working for somebody else, right? Like asking for a raise was very uncomfortable for me. So we kind of get scared or some kind of fear around talking numbers, talking what's our value and really explaining how that value coincides with numbers, with money. And I think that puts a little bit of fear. The other thing, and the reason I say it's not just women, my dojo master, he's a grandmaster, seventh degree black belt. And when I talk to him numbers, he's like, no, it's like, it's too much. And there's some people like him, and women or men, that they just are not comfortable around the numbers. They're not a numbers person. They're very creative. But what they need is definitely a person that could help them leverage the numbers and really understand the most basic things about the numbers. They don't have to become accountants. They don't have to know all the details of, you know, debits and credits. But what they need to understand is, like, if I look at my numbers, what are they telling me? And that's why I think having a very proactive accountant that is showing you forward instead of just what happened backwards is going to really make that shift. So that's where I see a lot of both women and men having a little difficulty with that money conversations.
And you kind of touched on this in the answer to that question, but what emotional patterns do you see when someone first looks at their numbers? I know people will get that aha number when I just do sales projections with somebody and we start looking at, but you charge this and your bills are this. Something's not going to add up if you can't fill in that blank with a reasonable number. You can't do that 35 times this month to pay the bills. You're not, you have to really line. So they just always are like, wow, just for the basic things. So what do you see as far as those emotional patterns when you first show somebody numbers and they've never really looked at it before?
It definitely is a shock of like, whoa, I have never seen that, or whoa, no one has explained it to me this way. An example is, again, not necessarily just women. It's just, I'm talking anyone. I recently had a prospect that came to me about more like financial insights. They want forward vision, which is great. But then I went into their books and I looked at it, and I usually make a little video of what I'm seeing because I want them to see what I'm seeing. And then I did a little review of what I'm seeing that is wrong. And I'm not going in details. I'm just looking just balance sheet, which is like high level, and then just P&L high level, nothing else, just what I'm seeing. And then of course we got back on the call, and I talked to him. He's like, hey, what do you think? Is there any questions that you have here? These are the stuff that I noticed. And those were his words. He said, I knew there was something off in there, but no one has ever explained it to me this way. That he could really understand the severity of how bad it was,
Right?
which now brings another kind of fear, right? Or how do I handle this? How do I make decisions around how bad it is? And that's a whole different thing, of course. Another conversations we would have to have, and they would have to commit to corrections. In general, those are some of the things that, as simple as even not even doing the work for them, those are the type of words that they use. I've never seen it that way. I didn't think it was this bad. You know,
Right.
on a
Those
positive note, of course, if it's something more like, for example, if I have We have a client that we do, monthly meetings, after we do the month end close. And we always review and show them, year over year what is happening, same time last year. It always brings conversations of like, yeah, I knew some of these costs were going up, but I didn't realize it was closing the margin so much. It was like
right?
narrowing the margin so much.
Because you didn't do the math.
Right. I'm like, "Can you raise the prices? What else could you do? Is there something else can you offer? Can you go with another vendor? Can you, negotiate another, let's say, fee?" That's where those conversations are happening. So it's not just accounting, it's more like advisory. We're advising them what are some actions they could take based on the numbers that are showing, as long as the numbers are correct.
Right. And to get to the place in the future, how to get there. Because with rising costs, you know it's happening as a business owner, but until you plug it in and you see the big difference in your profit margin, and now you know, okay, I got to make something. I either have to raise my prices or I have to, and it's hard to make those decisions without actually having the numbers in front of you. That maybe this will help. My next question. Can you break down the difference between revenue, profit, and business value, really in plain English for us?
Okay, sure. So revenues are basically sales. Anything that you're selling, whatever the price you're selling at, that is, your main revenue. You may have more than one revenue stream, but in general, revenues, you can say it's sales. The profit is anything left over after you've used that revenue to pay for these different expenses. And then you have that profit, which is really important. Of course, it's a very important number. A valuation is, and in simple terms, again, without getting all technical, valuation is what would someone pay or value your business based on what you've done and what you are planning to do. And a lot of times valuations are not just based on the sales or the recurring revenues. Those are really important things that they would look at. So the multiplier is also going to get affected if you have actual systems in place. So, for example, if someone's making a lot of sales, let's say they're making $1 million, their profit margin is like 20, 20. It looks like on paper it's really great, but then you look in the back end, there's really no systems. The business owner is the only one doing everything. He knows everything or she knows everything. And there's no processes. And let's say there's some employees that have been turning over, in the last year, they've had 20 people come in and leave. That's not very valuable for an investor. So there's a lot of those other back end things that would affect the multiplier at what point when you're ready to sell. So when business owners want to sell at some point, or they, and anyone could be either selling or just exiting voluntarily or involuntarily. So, any one of us can pass any minute. So if you have your systems in place, your business is going to get better value. If business owners, women business owners too, if they're thinking ahead of, let's say I'm going to try to build this business for 10 years and I'm going to sell, what are the things you have to implement today and over time so that you can get the highest?
Yes, that I think will help everyone.
Okay, good.
I'm familiar with what all of those are. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time and,
Yeah.
of course, took a lot of business classes too. But I know a lot of people that aren't, that they're excellent at what they do. But when you start talking about those numbers, they're not sure exactly what they mean. And so I know that that is going to be really helpful. What's the first metric that you look at when you're diagnosing a business and you're looking at it? What's the very first thing that's going to tell you a lot of information?
I'd say it's just one metric. One of my favorite ways to look how the business is doing is always looking back to where they came from. Same time last year always shows me how they're performing. The second thing I usually look at is the month to month trends. And I'm not talking about necessarily creating these gorgeous dashboards, even though those are, I think, very helpful. But for me, just me doing the work, let's say, I just pull it up in QBO and I'll just put it month to month. And I just happen to have the skill to like see what's happening. And when I'm doing those reviews for our clients, that's what I do. I just put the recording on and I just start talking. I just look at what's happening. So month to month is another trend that I'm always looking for and what is really standing out to me right away. So it could be in revenue, it could be in any of the expense areas. So, and then if I see something off, then I'm going to go dig in and see what is it that they paid for. And it could be something simple as they bought a whole bunch of computers, but they, somehow they put it in, in the P&L. But that if they're in accrual basis, they should be actually in, and fixed assets should be on the balance sheet. So that would be something like, whoa, 20,000, what do you guys spend on? And just, I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to make corrections from there to make sure that they're financials are really, comparative, they're accurate, and all of those things. So that's one of the things that I look at right away, year over year. And then the next thing I look at is month to month. What is happening?
That's awesome. Very, very helpful. I know people often don't have their books done month to month. And so it's hard to look at
If you
it
don't
if you're
even know.
not doing it every month, right? And no. I want to talk about your valuation MT, your methodology, and why valuation and knowing it matters before selling.
Yeah, this is a great question. And the reason this methodology came about was from the different experience I've had with different clients. And some of them were before I even launched my full firm. So before my career started in financial auditing. So when you're auditing, you're always going into back end, looking at if the financials are accurate. Are they, is management actually putting systems in place? You have, risk assessment you're looking at a lot of things that's going to give comfort to whoever is maybe loaning the money or they have shareholders and all of that. So that was one portion of the experience that I've pulled into my valuation MT of how I do things. Let's say, um, checking financials. Are they correct? Are there policies and procedures in place? Are there, let's say, do they have a financial forecast? Are they looking at revenues all the time? Are they readjusting? Are they pricing correctly? Each of those letters actually stands for a set of things that needs to be done. And why valuation? So I had this client, it was a project based and it was before I had the firm. I was just doing consulting work. And they actually had a bunch of investors from prior. They had shareholders from there, but they were going to bring in another investor. And she was actually from private equity. And she was questioning a lot of the numbers because she was like, it's not making heads or tails for me. I just don't understand what your financials are saying. So I helped them actually transition, correct the books to accrual basis so she can have better data to make decisions on. That prompted me to start thinking about valuation because I hadn't been exposed to necessarily M&A. It was just auditing and then corporate finance. So I've never been exposed to M&A. So it kind of got me very curious on what she was doing. And she was constantly, buying businesses. And I spent some time with her. And then again, with this gentleman, as he needed to build out the cap table and all that, it was the first time for me hearing any of these things. I was not in at all, but it just got me so curious. So over time, what I wanted to do is I got to use the software that actually gives 3 valuations with 13 financial KPIs. So I'm like, man, I can leverage this. I don't have to be an M&A expert, but what I could do is empower a business owner to use this valuation software for internal use. More like, let's run our numbers through the system. Let's see what valuation we get. Let's build a financial model that could build that next thing and then test it again. So that's how I built Valuation MTV, stands for evaluate your business. So that's like beginning the first step, then going into financial accuracy and all these different pieces is to build the model, like, and it just really pulls together all the different clients that I've worked with and the experiences I've had to put it in a structured way.
And it's so important for more than just M&A, which for anyone out there listening that's not familiar, that's mergers and acquisitions. And there are specific accounting type of firms, finance firms that help you figure out if you or want to sell in 4 or 5 years. They can help you get the maximum out and put everything in place during that time. I don't know how they are about, I need to sell it next year and let's hurry and get these things done, but they can definitely give you. So that's what she's talking about. And she has an aspect of her regular business, accounting business that she does for her clients that includes some of those valuations. So you can see how you're growing in that respect, as opposed to just the money you're making that you see coming in or your business, how much busier you are.
And the other thing is that what I've heard stories of people deciding that they want to sell their business and then they start working, let's say with someone who's interested. And then during due diligence, there's so much stuff that come up that they're like, they couldn't sell because the private equity or the investor that was interested in that business now pulls away because like, well, things are just way too messy for me to clean up. So then they step away. So they've had experiences like that, which now brings into the point of, okay, maybe I should really take this seriously, start building all of these pieces and then try and sell later. And So in my educational pieces, when I talk about it on shows like this, is don't wait until you have to sell.
No.
Build it as if you're going to sell. Which again, everybody has to exit at some point. Whether you want to sell and that's your goal from the beginning, or God forbid you get sick and then your family has to sell it because they don't know what you're doing in the business, they're not involved in the day to day, and they need to sell and they don't know what's happening. So you want to build a business that's totally sellable. You don't want to just be your job. So that's where I've heard a lot of those experiences. I'm like, this could really help people not get stuck in, I want to sell and then not be able to sell.
Well, and all being busy all the time and keeping it running can really cause a lot of burnout. And knowing and being able to look at your valuation and seeing that all that work's paying off, having that there, I think can be very effective for maintaining the mindset for success that you need to be able to move forward. And knowing about your finances can really help you in that regard instead
Absolutely.
of ignoring it. We're paying the
Absolutely.
bills, that's all that matters
Right.
kind of mentality, right? What do you see happen to sales confidence when someone finally understands their margins?
Oh, definitely the sales would most definitely go up because and there's this two prong about it because I had to learn this. As an accountant and a CPA and an auditor and a CFO at some point, my training was always on the numbers. So I could, I can come up with numbers all day long if we need to. If somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to do this," oh, great. So I can backtrack. So okay, this is the product. This is what we sell it. I can make the numbers. But as an entrepreneur, one of the hardest things for me was to learn how to actually go through a sales process, which I didn't even know what it was. So when you really don't know what you're doing for the first time, you're good at what you're really good at, which is for me was the numbers. Going into selling, it was just very difficult. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I didn't know what I was saying wrong. And maybe I wasn't. I just didn't know what I didn't know. So it's a two prong, I think, for you with your question is you want to understand the numbers and what the goal is, but then you also have to have that confidence of selling, whether it's you or your team. Because if you don't have a proper sales process, then you can't even track what you're really selling and you don't have your sales KPIs, which then plug back into the finances, which then be like, are we actually doing what we say we're going to do? So everything is actually related, but you want to know both sides so to be able to really hit the ground running there.
Right. I mean, I can do the numbers, but I'm definitely on the sales side and putting all of that. I'm a marketing person, but I tell you, when I break down just simple numbers to somebody, it can be so empowering. And I'm breaking it down in a different way. I'm
Right.
breaking it down in this is how many need so that you can sell because you normally close 50% or how
Right.
much.
Right.
And
Right.
this is how much you're projecting you need to sell to meet your financial goals. And often the number of contacts they have to make is so small in comparison to what they think they have to have. Because if you're closing half of them and you only need 10, that's only two a week. So you got to talk to four people a week and that's it.
Yes,
So I
yes.
have found
It
that to
simplifies it for
you could
them.
be really empowering if you can combine the 2 and add that financial knowledge in. It can be so empowering and it makes people realize, "Oh, it's not insurmountable." When you break it down into those smaller pieces, it just isn't as intimidating, and I have found that the 2 go very well hand in hand on a basic level. I don't get into the in-depth level, so I think for a business owner and an entrepreneur, it would be very empowering as well
Yeah,
to know
absolutely.
the whole big picture. This is all I
Yes.
have to do in order to
Yes.
do that. That's it.
Yes, exactly. And you're right on point because for example, some business owners, leaders, they're much better at the sales, right? And that's totally fine as long as they kind of understand or have a basic understanding like what they're doing on the sales side is how it's going to feed to that financial revenue. So what that number gets to. So very, very, very key to getting them to do a better job at the sales side.
And it can help people figure out if they're ready to scale, for example, if they have the systems in place. Let me see how I wrote this question because it was a big deal. Scaling. Everyone wants to scale. Am I ready to scale? How can I scale this business? And I went through a similar type of challenge trying to, because I do custom strategy, custom marketing strategy. That's
Okay.
difficult to scale, right? There's only
Mhm.
so much of mine that can be
Right.
custom that right? So coming
Exactly.
up with those strategies on how to scale and how to package and do all of that pricing stuff was really important part of me figuring out moving forward. What do you see break financially when someone scales too quickly? Right.
I can't be the one doing this analysis for the rest of my life. No, I don't see myself 70-year-old doing this. I mean, just don't.
For 50 people a month, right? I mean, I've got financial goals too. I've got to be able to meet them.
So, which brought me to kind of thinking through what do I do and how do I teach this? So, obviously, I have a small team and they do the basic stuff right now. But the idea is to build the system, like you said, the word system is like, what is that my intellectual property and how do I put it in a system and a training that is trainable so that my people, as I hire them, they can actually deliver the same thing I deliver at the highest, quality. So without a training, and that's why I meant it's like people, because systems and people, and it's different timing, but if you don't have the system, you don't have the training, then the people are going to come in, they're not going to know what they're doing. They're going to feel like either they're going to feel like they're not doing adequately and they leave, or you're going to fire them thinking they're not doing a good job, but you actually didn't set them up to win. So you want to be able to have the systems, but you also want to have the right people and train them well to be able to deliver what they need to do.
I often see, and tell me if you see this too, when I meet with people and they haven't scaled, or maybe they have a little, they've got one or two key people. And when they try to hire to scale, they expect that person just to train them to do what they do.
Yeah.
And it rarely ever works. It's very difficult for them to do that. And it's a burden on the person that's already overextended, right? They're overextended. That's why you're
Right.
hiring somebody new. And now you're training on top of that. But I think it can also be fearful to have all your eggs in those baskets, because what if it's the same for you? What if they leave? What if they pass away? I used to call this in the 90s the hit by a beer truck. I don't know why we said that, but we would say, well, what if you get hit by, bad things happen? And then the comedy, oh, well, you get hit by a beer truck and then nobody knows what's going on because you didn't bother to tell them. Do you think that part of that with a business owner, or maybe even with those key personnel, is fear based? They don't really want that expansion. They feel like they're going to get replaced. Yes.
And he's getting close to 5 million. So 1 million to 3 million. That's a spot where 1 million is a break point, 3 million is a break point, and then 5 million is another break point. So he's getting close to there. And then again, he needs financial help, financial insights. Nothing, he's not getting what he needs from his current accountant. But one of the things that's holding him back is himself. So every time we would talk to him, either his coach or myself, we're talking to him and he's like, well, there's certain word he used and he always downplays himself. He's like, he wants to grow, but then he downplays himself. I'm like, you reached almost 5 million by yourself, dude. I mean, give yourself kudos for getting there. But at the same time, you have to make decisions. Like if you don't make the decision, you're not going to move forward. So there's that fear of, I want to grow, but I don't know what I don't know. And I'm afraid to make decisions that could be the wrong decision. So they're in their mind constantly going over it instead of just taking a leap like they did before and just make a decision.
It's a complete mindset thing. And I do mindset coaching and I see that all the time. People are limited by themselves. I limit myself and have to talk myself out of it on a weekly
Yes.
basis, right? What are you
Yes.
doing? No, no. This is the way we're doing it. We're sticking by it. We trust that this is the way. And I think that's a big deal, is that they get in there and they're scared to move. They're scared to let go of something. Right? I'm scared to have somebody else do that because I've been doing it for so long, and you have to delegate to be able to move beyond that. And looking straight at the numbers is a great way to decide that, because it's not personal. Yes.
Of who's in my ear and who I should listen to and who I shouldn't. So I think this plays on a lot of business people, business leaders in their mind, and it's just playing. It's again, it builds extra fear. Because am I going to listen to this one? Is this one going to be the right one? But you just have to pick. And then if you fail for that one decision, well, you learn from it and you move on. That's life.
And I have also seen entrepreneurs, especially in my industry, marketing, and there's a wide gamut of marketing people out there, from content creators to videographers to digital advertisers, which could be anything, social media, all of that. And to the basic entrepreneur, they think we all do the same thing. So hearing from a bunch of different people, I have found people that are just, they listen to whoever the last person they spoke to was. Managing your time and having boundaries and setting a goal and working with specific people that you trust, that you get that connection to. And to get that, you really have to slow down. You got all this input coming in, and then I recommend people sit by themselves in the quiet with no
Yeah.
stimulus at all.
Yes.
And people will say, "Oh, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind." Well, you're not supposed to quiet your mind. Someone with a quiet mind's in a coma. You can't clear it. It's in there. But all of
Right.
that stuff it hasn't been heard. We input, 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 and the things that need to be heard that are coming from us have to rise up through all of that chaos and clutter. So when you sit by yourself, there's going to be a lot because they've been waiting to be heard, those thoughts. But if you sit and let them come and you don't ruminate on them and get focused, it will become clear and you will see, okay, this is the person that brings me calm.
Right.
This person freaks me out, makes me feel uncomfortable, makes me feel nervous, right? This person makes me feel calm. You'll be able to tell who that person is. In my experience, that is the best thing to have someone do. And maybe when they're calm, they decide they don't want to work with me. And that's okay because the important thing is that they find their path. And if I can help them do that and their path isn't me doing their marketing, that's okay. My person's coming. So we're getting close. All good conversations always go so fast. So last question before we get into you telling us about how we can find out more about all your stuff is, if there's a woman listening that feels overwhelmed by her finances, but knows she needs to step up as a leader, what is her first step?
Her first step is to accept the fact that she needs that help and then go out and find that person. Because if you set on your mind that I need the help, I know I need the help, and want to be connected with the right person, that person will show up. So I want them to not fear the numbers, but find the right person to show them the numbers that makes them feel comfortable looking at them and calm looking at them and be able to make the
And what should they really be looking for in that person? For me, I want to be able to feel like I can trust them, that they're not judging me, that they're going to help me without having any feelings about it other than wanting
wanting to help.
me
Yeah,
to be successful. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
of
hard
course.
not to when you look and God, it was just such a nightmare in their books, but it's not a judgmental thing. It's
Not at
a
all. It's the
how much you can help.
right. And you're right. You make a very good point is that if like, someone like me, where I go in and visually show you, let's say, what I see wrong, it's by no means it's judgmental. It's more like, I want to protect you and I want you to know what I'm going to try to protect you from. So it's a very different thing. So I think having that open mind as well, it's going to be very helpful for them. Very helpful.
I agree. It's a fearful thing. I think we avoid talking about finances as women. I think we're trained culturally to do that, to just accept the way it is and smile about it and absorb whatever bad nonsense behavior could be happening and deal with it. And we're really good at that. I mean, we are good at making things happen and find a way to yes. I think we need to be much more open to having the conversations and be open to taking that advice and realizing that we deserve that financial advice as much as a man does or anyone else does, even if we don't have a lot of money. That's how you get a lot.
Absolutely. That's how you get a lot. If you're not looking at your numbers and you're flying blind, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's why it is very important to be able to look at the numbers objectively and just make decisions. What are these numbers telling us? What are the next steps we need to take to be able to achieve this goal? And every woman deserves that. Every woman deserves that. And as a woman leader, they also have to feel comfortable opening up, right? So trusting that other person, let's say in my case, if I'm the accountant, like to trust that person that they do have their best interest at heart. And that's how I approach it every time.
Yep. And
And
in your
when you
gut, when you're talking to somebody and it's not a match and you're like,
yeah.
just go find somebody else. Not every finance person is going to mesh. That's not your person. That's not who you're meant for. So,
And one more thing I would like to add on, if I may, is because you asked about, the type of person. And not every accountant or tax person is actually doing the same thing. So I think having the education of what their skill set is, like I don't get into tax strategy because that's not my training. My training is an auditor and then a corporate accountant. So my focus is finance, building the business, supporting the business, getting a higher valuation so they're growing. So it's very growth oriented. Do I know tax stuff? Of course I do. I'm a CPA. But so when looking at who they want to work with, they should also have that education of like, am I looking for a tax strategist or am I looking a growth strategist? Very
and
two
this
different
is,
things.
they definitely are. There are lots of people that do taxes that are not accountants. They are just registered with the IRS as a tax agent and they're good at doing taxes, but they do not do financial planning for your business. They don't do projections. They don't do any of the stuff that Marie's talking about doing. They're great people. I know some of them. They're really busy during tax season and that's what they do. But that's not the same thing as having a CPA or an accountant take a look at your stuff. So, speaking of taking a look at stuff, how can we find your stuff, Marie, and find out more about your services and about all your methodology? Where can we find that out? And of course, you guys, I will link to all of it in the show notes. But in case you want it before then and before the episode, then here it comes.
Yeah. So I have two websites, one for the accounting firm, which is marietorossiancpa.com. And then my coaching, which is also related to the valuation MT, but from a coaching perspective, that's theprofitlab.biz.
I love that so much. And I think a lot of women need that coaching just the way you think about your financial childhood, how those thoughts were, how your parents were. They affect us so much. So we didn't have time to dive into that, but what a fantastic episode, Marie. Thank you so much for coming on as a guest. I learned a lot and I'm sure that the listeners did as well. So for all of you out there, you guys can, of course, learn more about our show and me on our website, dealswithheels.com. You can find out more about my marketing agency, hexagonmedia.net. Also in the show notes, and big things are coming. Our 100th episode's coming. So stay tuned. And until then, we're out.